Every generation looks in the mirror and arrogantly decides they are the season finale of humanity. We love pretending the universe revolves around our petty little dramas. History just sits back and laughs at our narcissism. From messianic math to prophetic poultry and world-class mental gymnastics, humanity has a spectacular track record of getting the apocalypse wrong. Welcome to the ultimate Hall of Fame for confidently incorrect doomsday predictions. 1. In 1806, a hen in England drew huge crowds by laying eggs inscribed with doomsday messages. People genuinely believed the omnipotent creator of the universe bypassed angels, ignored burning bushes, and decided to use a barnyard bird's cloaca as a divine printer. Locals wept and repented over poultry-based viral marketing. A low-budget rural scam turned an ordinary farm animal into an apocalyptic influencer. Then the terrifying truth came out. The owner was just shoving acid-inked eggs right back up the bird's reproductive tract. Think about that for a second. Instead of preparing their souls for eternity, these gullible villagers worshipped an animal abuse victim. Humans love scams. 2. Humanity hoarded millions of canned beans in the year 2000 because they feared a calendar digit change would spawn computer-driven global chaos. Grown adults genuinely believed their toasters, microwaves, and ATMs would suddenly gain sentience and burn society to the ground. They prepared to fight off cyborgs using rusty shovels, outdated encyclopedias, and a desperate prayer. The apocalypse successfully loaded up millions of solitaire games and crashed precisely 0 power grids. We survived the single greatest day for garage sales in human history. Millions woke up with a massive global hangover, staring at a basement full of spam they now had to eat for 3 years. Did you hoard beans for Y2K? 3. A respected astrologer charted the stars in 1524 and predicted a second great flood. A local nobleman panicked, went full Noah on the river, and built a 3-story ark to survive the incoming wrath. When a light drizzle finally started, a terrified crowd rushed the boat. They clawed at the wooden hull, screaming for salvation while standing in shallow mud. They trampled the nobleman to death trying to board his wooden salvation. A respected academic accidentally launched the worst-planned luxury cruise in medieval history. He created a lethal stampede over a minor weather event that barely warranted an umbrella. He charted the planets perfectly, but forgot to calculate the sheer destructive force of human stupidity. Irony remains undefeated. 4. The media whipped the public into a blind frenzy in 1835, claiming toxic comet gas would spark brain fever and mass insanity. People boarded up their windows and sealed their doors to keep the space vibes out. They suffocated in their own homes to escape a harmless light show. They blamed a passing rock in the sky for the fact that humans are just inherently crazy. It functioned as the 19th century version of blaming Mercury retrograde for your terrible personality. They sat in the dark, breathing stale air, waiting for their neighbors to turn into bloodthirsty maniacs. Eventually, they peeked outside and realized society was running exactly as normal. Space doesn't care. 5. Poking a dead guy with a stick in front of a paying audience rarely ends well. A group tried to drum up doomsday hype in 1708 by publicly resurrecting a deceased doctor. They treated the corpse like a divine circus act. The dead man stubbornly remained a corpse, enjoying his eternal vacation from their nonsense. They hosted the 18th century Fire Festival, where the headline act slept through the entire performance. Spectators watched grown men scream at a rotting body for hours, expecting the sky to rip open. The crowd demanded a refund while the stench of reality settled over the graveyard. The organizers promised an apocalyptic miracle and delivered a depressing anatomy lesson. Death won again. 6. A preacher predicted London would be flattened in 1758. Thousands of citizens paid surge pricing for refugee carts to camp in a muddy field outside the city. They abandoned their warm beds to huddle with pigs and sheep in a freezing pasture. They shivered in the dirt, waiting for a cataclysm that never arrived. When the sun rose over a perfectly intact London, they realized they got played. Instead of rejoicing, they decided to become the earthquake themselves. They returned furious and violently canceled the headliner. The world's most depressing music festival ended with an angry mob trying to beat the prophecy out of a charlatan. He sent them to sleep in the mud, and they returned to deliver a communal fist to his jaw. Ever wanted to punch a fake guru? 7. Nostradamus promised a terrifying king of terror would arrive from the sky in July 1999. The greatest prophet of all time took his one specific Super Bowl shot, and the scariest thing that dropped from the sky was a pigeon with bad aim. Believers stared at the clouds, clutching their translated texts, waiting for a celestial warlord. They got sunny skies and dial-up internet instead. He wrote prophecies so vague they read like fortune cookies drafted by a corporate lawyer. His one specific calendar guess turned into a complete whiff. The man built an entire legacy on being frustratingly ambiguous, only to destroy his mystique the second he actually committed to a deadline. The King of Terror never bothered buying a plane ticket. He failed miserably. 8. Predicting the apocalypse requires the unearned confidence of a guy who thinks he has God's personal cell phone number. The founder of Mormonism confidently gave a 56-year deadline for the divine return, dropping the location pin specifically in Missouri. Picture the heavenly host looking at a map, deeply confused why the ultimate cosmic finale is scheduled in a state known primarily for barbecue and high humidity. He left his followers staring at a Midwestern field, waiting for the sky to rip open. They got left on read by the universe. He essentially booked the creator of the cosmos for a cheap motel gig, and the headliner refused to show up. Missouri stayed quiet. 9. A doomsday preacher addressed the United States Congress 4 separate times in the 1840s. She paced the floor, screaming about the end of days while elected officials secretly sketched doodles on their parchment. She told lawmakers to ignore all policies because the world would self-destruct by 1847. Politicians politely took notes on raining fireballs and planetary destruction just to avoid another boring 3-hour speech on canal funding. They used the apocalypse as the ultimate political power move. You evade all accountability for bad legislation if you predict the country won't even exist next year. Congress basically sat through a doomsday presentation just to procrastinate doing their actual jobs. Political laziness wins. 10. The globe panicked over an ancient calendar reaching the end of its cycle in 2012. Millions assumed a piece of carved rock dictated the deletion of the universe. People threw away their life savings because their kitchen wall calendar only went up to December. The Mayans just intended to buy a new one. Grifters sold survival kits to terrified suburbanites who thought a rogue wave would swallow their lawns. We watched a masterpiece of global stupidity unfold in real time. It successfully collapsed the credibility of television history documentaries and gold-selling commercial marks. Bunkers were built, supplies were hoarded, and people said tearful goodbyes. Then the sun rose and everyone had to awkwardly commute to their office jobs. Did you fear the 2012 apocalypse? 11. In 1534, radical Anabaptists took over a city, and their leader crowned himself king of the world. A former bartender acted out a deranged video game fantasy in fancy robes while his followers starved in the streets. He paraded through the starving crowds on a stolen horse draped in gold, shouting prophecies at the sky. He indulged in extreme luxury, waiting for Jesus to vaporize his enemies with a divine airstrike. He threw the religious equivalent of a fraudulent music festival, complete with empty promises and a violently brutal reality check. The divine airstrike never came. Instead, a very real, very angry human army breached the walls and slaughtered everyone. He promised them eternal glory and delivered a horrific bloodbath. Actions have brutal consequences. 12. Americans in 1831 saw a predictable solar eclipse as God, turning off the lights before the final judgment. They hid in their dark basements eating emergency pickles, waiting for flaming swords to strike them down. They didn't rely on swords, shields, or a premium subscription to a VPN to survive the celestial assault. They relied on sheer terror. The universe just blinked, shifted the shadows, and turned the lights back on. God hit the cosmic dimmer switch, proving humanity will mentally collapse if you just temporarily unplug the sun. They screamed at a simple planetary shadow. A brief lack of sunlight reduced rational citizens to crying children hiding under wooden tables. Shadows cause panic. 13. Dancing so aggressively that the creator of the universe cancels the apocalypse just to admire your sick choreography takes pure arrogance. A religious group predicted the end in 1792. When the sky stayed blue and the ground stayed solid, they claimed their intense dancing convinced God to postpone the destruction. They treated the divine creator like a toddler distracted by shiny keys. They invented a shameless life hack to dance their way out of an unwanted appointment. They sweated through their clothes, shaking violently in a wooden barn, pretending their footwork saved humanity from hellfire. It takes staggering ego to think your local dance routine halts cosmic annihilation. They shimmied their way out of a failed prophecy. Dance fixes everything. 14. Thousands of people sold their homes in 1666 for a divine journey led by a Jewish mystic. He declared himself the Messiah and amassed a giant following of loyal believers. Then the local authorities threatened to cut his head off. The invincible divine leader shocked everyone by instantly converting to Islam to save his own skin. He aggressively rebranded his entire soul to avoid the executioner's blade. It felt like finding out Santa Claus isn't real and now works for the IRS. He executed the ultimate divine bait and switch, resulting in agonizing spiritual cringe for his bankrupt followers. They stood there homeless and humiliated, watching their supposed God tap out of the fight before the first bell even rang. Faith is cheap. 15. Europe collectively lost its mind when the year 999 ticked over to 1000. I'm not making this up. They became convinced the Pope operated as a dark sorcerer, and the sky would physically crack open. People gave away all their property, stripped themselves of wealth, and wept in the dirt as the clock struck midnight. Then they woke up on January 1st. The sun was shining. They realized they still had to go find their donkeys and walk to work. They lived through the original software panic, designed for peasants who thought computers were just magic rocks. A calendar changed pages and society dismantled itself out of sheer superstitious dread. They had to awkwardly beg for their stolen chickens back. Stupidity never changes. 16. Treating a city-saving emergency like a giant game of hide-and-seek requires profound delusion. Because the year 1666 had terrible public relations, Londoners lost their grip on reality. When the city literally burned to the ground, people ignored the roaring flames. Instead, they pinned the Lord Mayor down and tried to inspect his scalp for devil horns. They parted a politician's hair like a show poodle while their houses turned to ash down the street. The sky glowed red, beams collapsed, and citizens prioritized a paranoid scalp massage. Satan delegated a minor apocalypse only to watch humanity short-circuit and abandon basic survival logic. They chose a witch hunt over a water bucket. They let their city melt to chase ghosts. Ever ignored a fire to find horns? 17. A 16th century mathematician used wild numerology to predict an 8 a.m. apocalypse. He dragged his terrified congregation out into the morning mist to wait for their divine extraction. A pious group of followers turned into a bloodthirsty mob in exactly 5 seconds when their celestial Uber failed to show up. When the fog cleared and 8:01 a.m. hit, they nearly beat him to death. He applied calculus to decipher a cosmic secret sauce recipe, proving that mixing math and religion gets your performance graded with pitchforks. He stood on a hill preaching salvation and ended up sprinting for his life from the exact people he tried to save. Numbers don't lie, but prophets do. They shattered his ego with their fists. Math causes violence. 18. Upgrading yourself from a mere mortal to a beneficiary of divine nepotism rarely pays off. A naval officer claimed he was God's weird nephew in 1795. He boldly declared he would rule the entire world after a catastrophic earthquake. He tried to show up to Heaven's family reunion unannounced, forcing the Almighty to avoid eye contact with his crazy cousin. Instead of a golden throne, the government gave him a VIP suite in a lunatic asylum. He sat in a cell, waiting for an earthquake that never arrived to bust him out. He demanded a crown and received padded walls instead. It takes a special kind of arrogance to claim you share genetics with the creator of the universe. Ego meets reality. 19. Playing prophetic darts blindfolded never works. A serial apocalypse predictor failed to end the world in 2008, 2012, 2013, and 2019. He predicted fire from the sky, but couldn't predict a knock on his own front door. He warned his followers of divine wrath while ignoring the actual world-ending force coming for his bank accounts. The government arrested him for tax evasion. He acted like a guy who loses every casino game spectacularly but still tries to sell you merchandise in the parking lot. He dodged the apocalypse but got crushed by the unstoppable wrath of the IRS. He faced a judge who only cared about his missing decimal points. God forgives, but federal auditors never do. Taxes always win. 20. The universe beta tested an immortality claim in 1776, and the results were hilarious. A woman claimed she died and her body got hijacked by an immortal, genderless spirit. She built an empire on a blatant lie, living off the donations of the gullible. The eternal warranty abruptly expired in front of shocked followers when the spirit ironically died of natural causes in 1819. A celestial squatter refused to leave the property, triggering the ultimate demand to speak to the manager. The Cosmos' customer service line was dead. Her believers stared at a lifeless corpse, realizing their immortal leader forgot to renew her earthly subscription. The invincible spirit just gave up and flatlined. Ever met someone faking their entire identity? 21. A former space engineer sold millions of books predicting a 1988 rapture. When the event failed to materialize, he didn't apologize. He just sold a sequel for 1989. He told millions of bankrupt followers they just believed wrong the first time. He commanded them to believe harder, open their wallets, and buy another hardcover book. He built a mansion out of bad predictions. He became the corporate innovator of getting the apocalypse wrong. He treated a spectacular divine failure as a quick day one software patch. He stared at a furious crowd and boldly monetized his own incompetence. They didn't rely on logic, common sense, or a basic understanding of reality. They relied on a barcode. He scammed them twice. Gullibility pays well. 22. Constantly moving the goalposts of doom is a classic human defense mechanism. Romans believed a vision of 12 eagles meant their empire would fall in exactly 120 years. When that deadline passed, they just kept recalculating the numbers as they continued conquering the known world. Emperors stared at the sky, desperate to bend bird sightings into favorable political forecasts. They decided the eagles meant 1,200 years, or maybe they just symbolized a really good poultry dinner. They hit the snooze button on their own civilization's demise. They updated a rolling apocalypse like a buggy software patch. They manipulated their own mythology to justify a never-ending military campaign. Paranoia lasts forever. 23. A Welsh tailor in the 1650s tried to personally warn the king about the end of the world. He kept getting tackled to the cobblestones by palace security. He acted as a celestial door-to-door salesman who couldn't even get past the front gate. He proved that divine messages will get lost in the mail if the courier is a raving maniac. He became the world's first divine stalker. God probably wished he had just sent an email instead of a restraining order. The tailor stood outside the palace, nursing his bruises, screaming at stone walls. Guards dragged him away while he yelled about hellfire and brimstone. He thought he carried the fate of the world in his pocket, but he just carried a fractured jaw. Delusion hurts physically, and hurts. 24. In 156 AD, a group sold everything they owned because they thought the literal city of heaven would land in a specific dusty field. Picture standing in a barren dirt lot, experiencing elevator-style awkward silence. They stared at the clouds, wondering if angels lost the keys or got stuck in heavy celestial traffic. They waited for an overnight package delivery of the New Jerusalem that was marked out for delivery but just left them broke. They huddled together, shivering in the cold, realizing their real estate investment in the afterlife was a total scam. The Golden Gates never crashed into the mud. They traded their entire livelihoods for a patch of dry weeds. Ever waited for a package from heaven? 25. An internet conspiracy birthed a rogue planet destined to smash into Earth. The impact date keeps conveniently shifting from 2003 to 2012 to 2017. This terrifying planet is just too lazy to leave its cosmic couch. The entire theory survives on blurry photos of camera lens flares and paranoid forum posts. It provides the ultimate apocalypse for people who want the world to end, but also want the option to postpone it if they have weekend plans. Keyboard warriors calculate orbital trajectories using basic high school math and unhinged confidence. The planet refuses to show up, forcing them to update their fake spreadsheets every 5 years. It is a doomsday for procrastinators. The rock never arrives. Idiots keep typing. 26. Crawling out of a mud hole covered in goat droppings to awkwardly explain your life choices is a horrible way to start a morning. A viral letter in 1186 predicted continent-destroying storms. Panicked Europeans fled their homes to hide in smelly dirt holes with their livestock for a full month. The medieval equivalent of a fake news article shared on a social feed caused mass panic without the use of a single digital screen. They sat in the dark, breathing animal fumes, waiting for the wind to tear the world apart. When they finally peeked outside, the weather was gorgeous. They ruined their own lives over a prank letter written by an anonymous troll. A piece of parchment broke their minds. Have you ever hidden in a hole? 27. In 1844, followers waited in pristine white robes on hillsides to be beamed up into the sky. They endured the ultimate walk of shame back to their towns the next morning. They had to awkwardly beg for their old jobs back from the exact people who now owned all the worldly possessions they confidently sold off yesterday. Think about that for a second. A historical failure so epic it literally became a brand name known as the Great Disappointment. They experienced the emotional trauma of ordering a premium steak and getting a single sad piece of boiled broccoli. They walked down the hill in dirty robes, facing the mocking laughter of their neighbors. Their cosmic chariot abandoned them in the dirt. Shame is forever. 28. A preacher facing the executioner in 1651 tried to curse England with plagues as his dramatic dying words. He delivered a blistering final threat of fire and brimstone. He expected the sky to instantly turn black. His beheading was followed by normal weather and a completely dry, awkward silence. He tried to turn his own execution into a viral mic drop moment. God essentially muted his microphone right as the axe fell. He wanted a theatrical thunderstorm but received a quiet afternoon. The crowd watched his head roll, looked up at the sunny sky, and shrugged. He spent his final breath trying to cast a grand spell, and the universe responded with a gentle breeze. You can't intimidate the weather with a severed head. Has your dramatic exit ever flopped? 29. In 1780, a boy got lucky predicting a rainstorm and immediately let the fame poison his brain. He escalated his local weather forecast into a biblical epic within a week. He confidently predicted a world-ending flood that turned out bone dry. The town wanted to give their new prophet the world's biggest physical correction. He proved that when you get famous by sheer dumb luck, you should never drop a follow-up album. He went from a charming local curiosity to a public enemy in record time. Residents dragged him through the dusty streets, furious that they wasted their energy preparing for a flood. He thought he commanded the clouds, but he just commanded a mob's attention. He flew too high. Pride destroys careers. 30. A Victorian scammer predicted the fiery end of the world in 1864. When the flames failed to ignite, he didn't run away. He claimed he actually meant the spiritual world ended, not the physical one. Broke followers holding useless canned goods asked for a spiritual refund because their leader decided the divine vibes were just over. He executed the 19th century version of an email scam. He utilized the ultimate slick legal defense of forcing his followers to read the hidden terms and conditions. He moved the prophetic goalposts into a realm nobody could visually verify. He robbed them blind using invisible metaphors. He kept their money, smiled at their anger, and walked away unpunished. Scammers never quit. 31. A pastor gave God a flexible 33-year rapture window ending in 2021. Even with a 3-decade target, he still managed to miss the mark. He wrote a best-selling book aggressively titled with a question mark, and spectacularly failed to answer it. He approached Doomsday with the blind optimism of a professional gambler on a brutal losing streak. He told his audience he would finish his divine project sometime in the next 3 decades. His followers aged and died while waiting for a space chariot. They didn't rely on charts, biblical codes, or a complex star map. They relied on infinite patience. He pushed deadlines like a lazy employee avoiding an angry manager. Time ran out, the window closed, Delusion takes time. Delusion. 32. A 16th century prophet predicted he would spend exactly 6 months in a dark jail cell before Jesus arrived to free him. He dramatically rode into a city expecting a quick prison stay and a divine VIP rescue party. Jesus pulled a massive no-show. The prophet rotted in that exact prison for a full decade. He experienced the ultimate scenario of being careful what you wish for. His grand prophecy met a painfully delayed transit system. He accidentally predicted his own miserable life sentence while trying to act like a cosmic martyr. Every day he stared at the iron bars, waiting for an angel that refused to clock in for work. He handed the guards the keys to his own destruction. Have you ever predicted your own downfall? Wait, cut the audio, I need a second. We've covered way too much historical stupidity today, and my brain is starting to melt. I'm officially breaking the script right here because we need to hand out a trophy. Before this final story ruins the comedic vibe and sends us into a dark depression, we must crown a champion. The bronze medal for Doomsday Stupidity goes to the people fighting over eclipse shadows, but the absolute pinnacle of human absurdity belongs to the prophetic Leeds chicken. Getting scammed by a bird with a corrosive cloaca is unbeatable. It's the Mona Lisa of historical gullibility. Seriously, you can't write better comedy than a farmer shoving acid eggs up a chicken. Before we plunge into the darkest reality check of this entire list, who do you think deserves the bronze medal for Doomsday Stupidity? 33. In the 1850s, desperate Xhosa people believed a false prophecy. They slaughtered 400,000 cattle, causing a famine that starved 100,000 people to death. When prophecies mix with deep human desperation, they stop being a joke. They become weapons of mass self-destruction. The apocalypse rarely falls from the sky. We usually build it ourselves out of blind, desperate hope. Who's the absolute biggest idiot from this video? Drop their name in the comments. I'll pin the most brutal roast for the next video. Smash that like button and join the cult.